Welcome everybody to this wonderful session to get today here with the one and only Henry.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you, Hans.
Oh, thank you so much for being in. And we had this one in the works for a long time, and then we rescheduled it a bunch of times. So I'm really glad that we're doing this here today. I want you to take a few minutes and kind of introduce yourself and Dashbot and your role at the company, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess I've known Hans almost 6 years now. It's been a small ecosystem in this bot space, but remember meeting him when I first really started out at Dashbot in San Francisco. Always a bright soul, always hanging around, crowd favorite, right? As we could tell. But myself, again, my name is Henry Hu. I'm currently head of sales as well as conversational AI here at Dashbot. Been with the company 6 years now. And so where we really started, we started our roots as a chatbot analytics and reporting platform, and really have then since expanded our platform to support the analysis of any type of unstructured data. So we'll talk a little bit today about data. We'll talk a little bit about insights. And then, yeah, happy to share my experience and some ideas that we've been seeing, as well as new trends in this space, which I'm sure we're all excited to learn about, especially in regards to large language models and the possibilities behind them. So,
Yeah, that's very good. And for people that don't know, we always have new people here. My name is Hans. I'm one of the founders here at Conversation Design Institute, where we teach people the skills that they need to develop human-centered, inclusive AI assistants, chatbots, voice applications. And speaking of unstructured data, Henry, I see that you have 6,000 unread emails in your inbox. I don't know,
oh,
maybe you're sharing a little more than you want.
I
So
am sharing, definitely sharing. Let me go ahead and reset that. Give me just
uh,
1 second here.
I just noticed that, but that's a lot of emails. So I guess anyone that wants to send Henry an email now, it might be a while before you get a response.
Hey, I have to do some smart filtering, and I do definitely work a lot on the customer and the sales side. So you can expect a lot of volume and scale to come out of my inbox.
That is good. And I think if you go to the next slide, we're going to see kind of what we're going to be talking about. Like you kind of introduced it already, but it's really data versus insights. What's the difference? That's one of the things that we're going to cover today, because a lot of times people think they're collecting data, they're storing files, but really, how are you using it? Are you even using it? Are you asking the right questions about it? Those are some of the things that we'll cover. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the chatbot maturity curve from Dashbot's perspective, where it's like, what should you be doing at which stage of the projects? And what I like, Henry, how you did that is, what are the questions that I need to ask? Because I can, now I've got data, I've got it organized, but what are the questions that I want to ask at which phase of the project? And then we'll talk about some of the new cool things in conversational AI. So that's pretty neat. And I guess when people have questions, you can always like throw them into chat immediately or use the QA function. And if stuff is relevant and we see it at the right time, we might address it immediately. Or we'll do a longer Q&A at the end. But yeah, just join in and it should be fun. So tell us, Henry, the big question that's on everybody's mind, what are these people, what are they getting wrong about data and conversational AI? Take us on the journey, man.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll start off with maybe a small misconception, and that is like how much data that we're actually generating today and how little of it is actually being used. And the way I like to tell this story is really paired well with this next visual here, which is you see this iceberg, and really like 90% of the data that any business or organization generates in today's world, or really in the past few years, is what we call that unstructured dark data. This is the difference between structured data, which is, you can imagine, are your traffic numbers, your financial data, your basic user data. Imagine just these are all your quantitative metrics that you're reporting on. Whereas the unstructured dark data is essentially the qualitative side. What are the conversations? What are the textual data? And again, bot data being a big proponent that's generating a lot of this unstructured data. And what's a big challenge here is that unstructured data is really difficult to analyze. For a lot of business and teams, the only way to understand the qualitative insights that come from unstructured data is to manually comb through and review transcripts. Look at those conversations, read through them to understand, where are their pitfalls, where are their failures, and what's happening in these conversations to get customer feedback. So a lot of businesses, again, they build dashboards, they spend tons of money on BI tools, really just for that 10% of that
Mm.
structured data. And so just to add to that, right, because we are just working on structured data in today's world, data is sometimes looked at as an afterthought for a lot of chatbot projects. A lot of companies and teams get into the mindset of, let's build the bot, let's implement it, let's deploy it, and then we'll set up analytics and reporting to measure progress.
Yeah.
But what's happening there is they're focusing on just reporting on what is happening. What are my user counts, right? What are my number of conversations? What are the intents being triggered? But they're missing out on the why. Why are people escalating? Why are people containing? Why are people loving or hating this chatbot experience? And all the why answers come from the unstructured portion of that data that's often not getting touched today.
So are you developing with the dark data? If you're not looking at that, are you also, so you're not getting a full picture, but are you really also actively developing blind spots almost, where it just puts you on the right path entirely, trying to find for solutions in the wrong direction, kind of?
Exactly. Exactly. So, in the bot world, we have intents, right? That provide a little bit of structure to the conversations. You're seeing the intents that get triggered. You get an idea of what people want from your chatbot. But with language, there's so much other variation. There's so much that you can't anticipate as a bot designer or an NLP designer when you're creating those intents. There's always something that you may be missing, a new use case, a new variation, a new utterance. And that then falls into this bucket of unstructured data. You get over time, as you begin to scale, as you get more volume, you get, as you mentioned, more of these blind spots that start to occur. And that tends
Yeah.
to grow over time. And eventually it reaches a critical mass point where people are having conversations with your bots that are just hitting dead ends that your bot can't support, but needs that consistent training and optimization. And in order to get that data and those insights, you have to be able to look into that unstructured portion of that data.
Yeah, and a lot of teams never get to that point because, like you say, it's an afterthought. Then they start building their own dashboards. That always gets delayed. It's only looking at a small thing. Then, like, people are backed up. So if you start building this in house, it's just going to take a while. You might never get to it. Like, I guess that's kind of the you're paying more, you get less insights, I guess.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not that companies don't want to do it. It's the fact of that it's challenging, it's difficult, and it's honestly daunting to even try and start, right? If 90% of your data is unstructured, just imagine how many different sources from how many different platforms, all those customer interactions, those are all sources of unstructured data. And it's actually quite difficult even to get all the sources of these data into one place, right?
Yeah.
That's already a big, mental hump for your IT teams to be able to overcome. So
Yeah.
that is the number one first challenge is how do I centralize all this data that's held in silos all into one place? Then it's how do we then analyze that at scale? And large language models have proven to be able to fill that gap of analyzing this unstructured data very well. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later in this webinar, in this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk about that. And when I see email, I was reminded of a client that we had. The chatbot was not performing, so they asked us to have a look at it. But actually, it turned out that they were sending out very confusing emails, and every
Mhm.
time they send out the confusing emails, people would reach out, and then the chatbot wouldn't process it. But the solution was not in fixing the chatbot; it was in actually writing better email. So you can never look at one part of the puzzle, only
Exactly.
focus on one part because it's all connected in a way, right? So that's the important thing. So then data versus insight was on the list. And I think if you kind of go to the next one there, well, yeah, what's the difference? And it's a poll question. So I guess we have someone putting up a poll. I don't know how that works. Ah, there it is.
Yeah, we'll give everyone a minute, but I think the purpose of this question is like, we obviously all know what data is. And we also hear insights as a term that gets tossed around quite a lot in this
Yeah.
industry. Everyone has insights. Everyone that has analytics, reporting, a dashboard can give you insights. But what are really insights, right? If there's a difference between data and insights. And I'm just curious to get people's opinion on what that
So,
is. No wrong
so
answers.
data is qualitative and insights are quantitative. Data is raw and insights are processed. Data and insights are interchangeable terms. Insights are collected and data is analyzed. None of the above. Insights contextualize the value of data.
I like that one.
I like that one too. I have high hopes for the projects you're working on, Moon. Insights contextualize the value of data.com. Can we see what everybody is responding? Let's see. So everybody says data is raw, insights are processed. How do you feel about that?
I feel pretty good. I think people are on the right track. Again, no wrong answers here, right? I think that the industry has made the term and the definition of insights very vague for a lot of us. And so hopefully in the next couple of slides here, we can bring a little bit of clarity around the difference between data and insights. But
I
thank you
think
for
it's
everyone.
I think it's an important point that you make there, though. Like in every enterprise project, like you need to have very clear definitions because you may be talking to people about data and or insights or whatever other conversational AI term, and you may just be speaking about completely different things and not realizing it until it's too late.
That is
So
true.
have good definitions in your kickoff meetings, everybody.
Hmm.
A word from the wise. All right,
Awesome.
next one.
Let's go ahead and share the results. I don't know if people can see it, but it looks like the overwhelming answer is going to be data is raw and insights are processed, which
Yeah.
definitely I agree, right? There is an element of truth to that. And we'll get into, again, a bit of an explanation behind why that is. So let's go ahead and continue here. So let's go ahead and talk about data and insights. And I'm going to start here with what is data? Data essentially is the raw facts, right? The clusters of words, the numbers that your chatbot may be generating, you're containing, you're storing it inside a database. And the examples that you see on the right side here, they're effectively going to be in the forms of CSVs, Excels. And when you read through, let's say, a column or a row, the raw facts don't really mean anything to you. They don't convey any meaning, but it contains, again, that raw data that you've generated. Now, before we can turn data into an insight, there's actually a middle step. And that is, how do we then transform your data into information? So how you turn data into information is by shaping it, by filtering it to be able to reveal different patterns and trends. This is your standard essentially for any type of analytics or reporting dashboard. You're taking your raw data, you're running it through something like a SQL query or a BI tool, and you're outputting, let's say, a line graph, a bar graph, a trend graph. And what you're doing here now is really you are shaping and massaging that data. You're filtering for things that are interesting, and you're outputting it into a data visualization that makes it easy to look at. Is my user count growing? Is my NLP confidence score increasing or is it decreasing? And maybe what are my top and most popular and common intents? The visualizations allow you to tease that out and then identify signals in your data very quickly with, again, information. To sum that up, it tells you what is happening in your bot. And that is very important still for measuring progress, right? Looking at success and growth of your bot. So that, again, is still a critical piece as part of tracking and creating progress. But chances are today you have a dashboard, right? Most platforms are utilizing some type of dashboard or have a native dashboard that's available. But in order to get and make your information more actionable, let's say, for example, you detect a signal like your CSAT is dropping or your rating is dropping. You're not really sure where to take your next best action. That's when you need to cross over that bridge from information and start thinking about if you're getting insights or not. And so what is an insight? Insight is now when you interpret and you connect different pieces of information to now reveal new patterns and possibilities. So you're actually layering on different pieces of information to actually get to a conclusion that you can ideally take action on. And you may ask, well, what is the way to be able to easily find insights? And the simple answer I like to give is, in order to find insights, you start by identifying a signal in your information. Let's say your user counts dropped, or your CSAT score dropped, or your escalation spiked. That's that signal in your information. And that's when you begin to dig into that piece of information and ask why. Why did that happen? What is the cause of that problem? What is the root of that problem? So I'll give you a simple example here. And Hans, feel free to jump in if you have any questions. And if you want to probe me too, happy
Yeah.
to do some
No,
explanation.
I was just thinking like all these things, like it kind of ties into what kind of goal. If you don't set any targets, you don't know if you're hitting them or missing them
Mhm.
either. So it's also like the insights are also derived from, I guess, KPIs and targets that you would define. Because it's like, oh, CSAT is falling, but what's our objective around CSAT, right? It's kind of like,
Exactly.
oh, it went down with 10, like it went from 80 to 75. Okay, but are we shooting for 70 or are we shooting for 100? Like, so I guess it's without clear KPIs and clear objectives, information, like even the insights are almost meaningless.
Exactly. Like, don't get led astray, right? Just because there's a big uptick or downtick, maybe in something that's secondary to what your primary goal is. And I absolutely agree, Hans. There's often in today's world, there's often too much or almost like sensory overload of data.
Yeah.
It takes a particular focus to make sure that you're getting your team and you're putting your resources in the right tracks.
Well, and that's a lot of times the case though. When there's not a clear vision, they're not really experts in the room. It's like a lot of time in conversational AI, particularly in the early years, a couple of years ago, to be everybody with an expertise different than conversational AI was part of a conversational AI team. So they
Mhm.
kind of looked at it from their perspective, but they didn't really know what to do. So then you end up kind of sitting, you're looking at dashboards and being like, oh yeah, so that went up. All right. Oh, that went down. Like it looks nice. You got graphs, you got bars, and you can talk about it, but you don't really know what you're doing. Um,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, let's get into that example, right? That ties into the exact answer example that you said, which is you're looking at a dashboard, you're trying to find a signal, and let's say you do, right? And the example is your seat sets dropped. That's a big part of your primary goal. You begin to ask why. So when you ask your first why is when again you're trying to get to an insight, you're layering on more information. For example, you may be filtering for conversations with negative sentiment and then picking out what are some of the top intents that are triggered when there's negative sentiment present. That could be billing and payments. Let's go ahead and ask another level of why. We may go into billing and payments and start looking at the journeys. Where are people dropping off? Where are people escalating in billing and payments? And then we can understand that they're dropping off at a sub intent, maybe for over in payment, maybe for breakdown of charges, right? You're getting more and more specific when you begin to ask and start to ask question around why. And then when we get to our final level of why, we may pull up and expose all the transcripts that had overpayment and charge it, breakdown of charges. We'll read into them and you can start to detect that there's reasons of, incorrect invoice amounts or lack of clarity. And so the deeper whys that you get to, the more clearer actions begin to shake out. So on the bottom here, maybe you need to add in more intents that can explain how payment is processed. Maybe there's an accounting issue that is, again, like Hans's your email example earlier, is irrelevant to the performance of your bot. It's something another department may have messed up, and now you're feeling the lagging effects of people complaining into your chatbot. So that there's another department that we need to go focus on and address the issue about. But the point here is again, as we begin to ask why and procure the answers, insights are the answers are really when you begin to ask why. And the more whys you're able to answer, the more clear your action plan now becomes.
Yeah, but it's quite a bit. So I think this kind of comes back to like having a very clear goal because it's a process of figuring out every time you're going on the hunt to look for the right, asking the whys around certain things. So it's like it's a full-time gig to just go over this and analyze it. If you get to that skill, you have so many conversations, and I guess that's kind of proving the point, because that's why Dashbot exists in a way, right? Like you can't even do this manually because it's a serious effort. And I guess what's nice about a product like this is that it helps you ask those questions. Like, because what we're saying is like, you have so much data that you're not really sure even what to do with. So you need to connect it,
Mhm.
you need to process, you need to analyze it. There's a lot, and actually having one interface that helps you do that, but also helps you find the language and analyze it, it becomes a yeah. Then you can finally get to work and actually start doing stuff. Otherwise, you're just processing, I guess, right? That's the
Exactly.
so I think that kind of brings us to that next part, this chatbot maturity curve, which because I guess there's a big difference when there's people in the chat here that that just are starting out with a project. They don't have the scope probably isn't massive. You got a few intents. You don't have a lot of traffic versus, well, what I said at the beginning, like 100 million conversations a year with massive volume, lots of scope, lots of complexity. Do I want to? It probably changes what I should be looking at as my project matures. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah, so from our lens, we're going to be looking at the maturity curve from the point of the data that you'll be generating and the types of questions that you'll be asking of your bot at each stage. So really the three stages are going to be broken out as growth. You're really just starting out, you're gaining traction, you're implementing, getting to foundational when your bot becomes a critical product and part of the organization, and then finally to state of the art. How do you now take the bot and expand it now to other parts of the organization? How do you go omni-channel, build it to scale and find repeatability? And so on the growth stage, the types of questions you'll likely be asking are going to be related with, are people adopting, are people engaging and finding the bot, right? Is this the right channel for my customers? Or is it, or let's say, if is my audience too antiquated and they're used to talking on phone calls and a
yeah.
chatbot isn't the right fit? Right. So understanding, is it going to be adopted well? Is it going to be used effectively and for the right reasons? And will customers even find it if it's placed, let's say, on a corner of your website that no one ever goes to? But as you get to foundational is when you start to really see value in the chatbot, right? You're getting conversions, you're getting containment, whatever the use case your bot may be. But now you're starting to fine tune. And this is where you begin to start asking the questions around why. Why do people love this experience? Why do they hate it? Why do they drop off? Why do they prefer to talk to a human? And where are there now friction points that we can find again to fine tune and optimize that experience? As well as where do I expand and build on my NLP or intent model to start supporting more use cases? And then finally, as we approach state of the art, is again, when you start to find repeatability and take this to scale, how do I then find and identify new use cases from our other data sources, like our live chat, like our IVR, right? The chatbot is really just a natural extension of your contact center. You're trying to contain users, and if not, it'll go into your contact center. So why not utilize training data coming from the contact center to train the bot and vice versa? Right. And also when your bot starts to reach that level of scale, it now also becomes a critical point of collecting your customer feedback, especially at large organizations. And so when you make a change in your bot, it can actually have trailing effects to other parts of the organization, such as NPS scores, CSATs from your voice of customer team. You are now a critical part of that entire customer experience.
Yeah. So initially it's like let's see if people want to interact with this thing and if they can find it. And it's very much like get them away from the phones or from live chat. It's about let's get this thing to work, see if it works. Then make sure that it actually works properly, that people enjoy it, that it's doing well. And if that's the case, we're just going to start adding more use cases, start adding more scope, start adding more channels. And once you're doing that, you're just creating this center. It becomes the eyes and ears of the organization almost, because now it becomes that first point of contact for everybody. That's where people go and and ask questions, you know, maybe share their opinions or buy products because they know the thing is always there. So then it starts informing everything and making everything better. So it kind
Yeah.
of goes from like testing the waters to making sure it stays afloat and doing a good job, and then it
Mhm.
just starts accelerating everything in customer experience, and even like it informs products decision too, right? That's
Exactly. Yeah, you couldn't have put it any better. And you know, to tie it back to the concepts of data, information, and insights that we were covering before, the growth stage is where it's appropriate to just live on the information stage, right? You're looking at adoption, engagement. You can have a dashboard with information that can show and capture that success. But as you get to foundational is when you begin to need to have to ask why. That's when you really need to start producing insights. And that can either be done through tools like something like Dashbot, or it could be done with sheer manpower, right? You can have people reviewing transcripts each day to be able to and answer the question why. But you may argue, like, is that truly scalable? What if we continue to grow? What if we want to go and scale to other different channels? So that's when you may want to consider whether you're using large language models or you're using specialized tools to help you procure those types of insights. And then finally, as Hans, you're mentioning, is how do you become a center of excellence within your CX organization? And that's when you really focus on scaling and repeatability. How do you move to omni-channel? How do you expand that service across the different channels and touch points that your customers can come in from?
so how long does it take your clients to go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3? What kind of time frame are we talking about?
I think that unfortunately widely varies, right? And I'm sure you have experienced that too. There's a whole spectrum of how, let's say, like how data savvy or like data driven some organizations are. Some organizations may have come to Dashbot saying, we want to build our first bot, but we don't want to start from scratch. Here's our contact center data. Help us analyze it to begin, right?
Yeah.
In that case, they may be jumping beyond the growth stage. They've maybe already done all the analysis on their end, on their web traffic and their customers to know that this chatbot placed here is going to drive value. And we don't want to develop that from scratch either. We want to
Yeah.
mimic what some of our best agents are doing, create a bot model it behind that. They may be jumping directly to foundational. And then from
Y-
there, once they prove out success, they'll start scaling immediately into omni-channel. So
Yeah. And
yeah,
then maybe some of the startups that we have in the chat here, they're just looking at getting adoption and users. What's the difference to an established brand that just know, like, if your call center is packed and you can't handle it, you know you're going to get adoption on a chatbot. So that's the easy part. Then it's just about handling that well and making sure to have a good experience. Whereas if you're kind of creating a conversational AI product as a startup, that actually growth becomes your hardest problem.
exactly. Like on the flip side, I've seen cases where chatbots were put on the worst part of websites. I
Right.
think the example that comes to mind is there's like a pest control company, and they had a big box in the center where it says, "Put in your phone number, and we'll call you right away to schedule an appointment." And at the same time, they had a bottom chatbot, but at the bottom right hand corner of the page, where you had to input information in more steps than just putting in your phone number,
All right.
and it had the same conclusion, the same result. It's like customers are like, why would I do a 3-step thing in the bot when I could just do one step in this big blank box you've already put in the middle of my website? And so
Yeah.
even something as simple as like, does it fit for my audience? Is it in the right place at the right time? And yeah, you need information at that point to validate that, right? And
Yeah.
it was kind of a simple answer that it wasn't
That's
placed
interesting.
right.
Makes me think of had a client once that put the chat, like, so all the customer service thing was like couple pages down, and that's why you would find all of that. And then so that worked, but then they had the chatbot, and all of a sudden they put the chatbot at the front page. So now, because the chatbot was very limited in what it could do, so a lot of people get handed off to live chat, and all the agents were just completely overworked because they were hidden behind those service pages, but now they put the chatbot front and center, getting so much traffic that the absolute numbers in the live chat center went up too.
Yeah.
So you gotta think that stuff through and make sure that it sits at the right place in the full journey.
Yeah, it looks like we have a question in the Q&A section. Let's see here. I'll read it out loud for us. It seems like this is a framework for customer service Q&A as a point of contact for customer, as opposed to expert assistance to assist users in a process. So are we referring to the type of chatbot? And if so, I would argue, why couldn't it be potentially both, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, I think everyone wants their chatbot to be the latter. You want it to be an expert assistant. You want it to be able to answer questions, ideally deal with simple transactions like resetting a password, giving me a refund. If you can do all of that and you're my expert assistant that can do it, phenomenal, right? But in cases where, let's say, your bot isn't able to handle something, it's something it's not trained for, then it needs to have a fallback point, right? It needs to have a fallback point that allows them to connect to a customer service
Yeah.
point of contact.
Yeah. And what we generally see, if you sort of look at how these things come into existence, a lot of times it does start with like a simple FAQ chatbot, like customer service, answer a bunch of questions. Then it will have a few transactional journeys, creating more value. And then other departments start thinking like, oh, I want a chatbot too. And it start adding it to more channels and more journeys are added. And then sales departments come in. We're like, hey, this would work for us too. And products comes in. So instead of developing 20 different chatbots, then and usually that happens at one point where you got all these different projects going on, but then you start developing this capability where it is one AI assistant that is helping with product tours, with demos, with scheduling meetings, with customer service, with sales. And that's ultimately what you want, and that is the omni-channel contextual thing that when you go to a website, it says, hey Henry, good to see you again. How do you like that new Patagonia vest you ordered last week? Uh, uh, what can I do for you today? Right. And so it's one point of contact for everything.
Yep.
Um,
I'm shamelessly from the Bay Area and probably own too much Patagonia gear, but Hans will always riff on me for that.
yeah, I'm on Team Cotopaxi these days. How do you measure drop-off rates for chat and voice bots and understand whether users drop due to their inquiry being resolved, frustration, or inattentiveness? Right. So yeah, you still got to look at it. You got to drill down, right?
Yeah, that's the short answer, right? And there are specialized tools in the market. And, if you've never seen like the Dashbot platform before, you can feel free to reach out to me. There are tools to visualize the journeys when someone starts, let's say, an intent path. And the tool, imagine it like a Sankey graph, can show you where are there visible drop-off points, where are there points of escalation. You can see that visually communicated in a graph that allows you to pinpoint and say, okay, there's a big bottleneck when someone reaches this step in that journey.
Yeah.
Then the last final step here does require today some of that manual review. It does require you to dig into a subset of that transcript where someone does escalate and then read into that transcript to understand, okay, was it because of an intent failure? Was it because of something that was not handled? Or was it even something misunderstood and out of scope? Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different various reasons that can lead to failure and result in a customer, let's say, dropping off or escalating, but it requires us to have to dig into that. But the idea here is, how do we narrow down our focus onto the few conversations that represent that problem, rather
Yeah.
than finding that needle in a haystack, looking through every single conversation that's ever happened with your bot?
Yeah, and then this is also where design comes in, because if it's inattentiveness, it's like you can have escalating detail, because what you're pretty much saying, there's a no input from customers when they're not paying attention anymore. So you take three turns with design patterns as escalating detail to get their attention back in. So you make sure that it wasn't that. Or sometimes the chatbot, even though they're matched in the right intent and the chatbot can actually help them, if the chatbot speaks in a way that doesn't make sense, is confusing, doesn't seem to reflect what the customer wants, they might still drop out with frustration. So then your solution is in actually rewriting the message that the chatbot says, right? So they're still, should they have been in this intent, right? Are they still with us? Have we done everything we can to help them? Can we actually deliver on this? Are we using the right words to get them to the next point? Or sometimes, we're talking about stress management, behavior design, psychology. Sometimes we just need to add a little more design effort into a journey to get them to that next step. At the end of the day, like every message coming out of a chatbot is kind of designed to get the customer to the next message. Like it's just like, you keep the conversation going, needs to have a prompt, the action needs to keep going. Sometimes when your messaging is just soft, there's no, there it doesn't do anything. People drop out. But yeah, like Henry says, like you can't if you would identify the problem, there's already so much um, angles you can take to look at it that you definitely need to make sure you're looking at the right problem because otherwise it's a waste of your time.
Exactly. How are we doing on time, Hans?
Yeah, I think I mean we're doing a Q&A here a little bit. We've got a little bit of the new trends in conversational AI that you can maybe talk about, like how when do large language models into this thing? I think you touched on it a little bit, particularly around those maturity models or
Mhm.
there's different levels. Like everybody's taught, I also see a question here in the chat, like, will AI make the chatbot experience better? I guess that's kind of like large language models. Does it make it better?
Yeah.
Where do you see it being used in classification, summarizing, verbose queries into simpler language that are easier to match to intents? Like, how is Dashbot using LLMs in the whole product to analyze all this data?
Yeah, great question. So I'll talk about LLMs and then I'll talk about how AI will make a chatbot experience better, if it's the right fit or not. But for LLMs specifically, right? I'm sure we've all heard the buzz. I know there's probably a few handful of us here that are experimenting with powering chatbots fully off of LLMs. I think from our perspective at Dashbot, a lot of there's a bit of stagnation, at least on the enterprise side, in terms of adopting LLMs for fully customer-facing bots. There's some apprehension, obviously, around generation, around hallucination. There's some risks that are involved until the technology is better understood and we design more guardrails before it can go into, I would say, more of an enterprise setting. The cases where I've seen a large language model powered chatbot deployed is typically with maybe smaller, more agile companies. They can really benefit off of not being hands off from their customer experience, and they're okay taking some risks with that particular channel. But where Dashbot has found a lot of success, particularly with LLMs, is specifically on the data analysis side. So rather than using LLMs for generation, as in a chatbot use case, to generate an answer, we're asking the LLM to actually analyze the data and help us answer the question why. Like the simple starting point use cases, has anyone ever like uploaded a PDF or a blog article into ChatGPT and asked like, can you summarize this for me? Can you give me the key points? Can you even provide me and cite me the sources and the quotes for the reason why you gave that key point? The LLM and GPT actually does a very good job because it has the exact source. It has a source code. It can pull the example. It can give its reasoning why. And you can validate that very quickly by going again back through that article you uploaded and going to that part where they cited their source. And so, again, that sweet spot we found where it doesn't hallucinate, it doesn't really need to generate. It's literally just going and combing through this mass corpus of the data you already have, AKA your chatbot conversations, and you're just asking the LLM to do the work of answering the question when you ask why. Why did you do this? Why were customers unsatisfied with this use case? Why? You can continue to ask the LLM different multiple layers of why And chances are it will provide a citable source and an answer for you each time as you dig into the analysis. But the question now is, how do you really do that at scale across thousands, tens of thousands of conversations? And how do you then take that outcome and then be able to roll that up into something as simple as a dashboard? So that's kind of the world that we are at today at Dashbot. We found a sweet spot with the large language models, and we are running a ton of different pilots with customers on how to test that to help them answer the question of why at scale. So if that's something that's of interest, that's definitely something we'd love to explore with all of you.
Yeah. And Henry is very easy to find online. He's got email and LinkedIn. He's easy to find. There's another question here, and there's two questions now. First, Philip Hahn, who says, um, any idea how to measure drop-off reason in a quantitative way to be sure? What percentage of the drop-offs to attribute to containment rate? I'm confused by this question, but maybe that makes sense to you.
I can take a stab at this. Any idea how to measure drop-off reason in a quantitative way? I think that alludes to what I just said, right? Which is like, let's say, for example, you can use a large language model on one transcript to ask, what is the reason for this customer to escalate or this customer to drop off? But the question was, how do we do it in a quantitative way? How do we do it in a way that I can roll up into a dashboard where I can just see on a quick bar chart what's the top 10, let's say, reasons a customer has dropped off? There are ways to do this. It does take a little bit of, I would say, how do I put this? In intuitive, I guess, more engineering to be able to make this happen. It's a blend of having like building the right BI tool as well as pushing the right prompts on the large language models to create that output. But there are possibilities. And so I would say rather than me trying to butcher this and explain it in words, this is a lot easier explained when you see the product or see a visual of it. So shoot me an email. We can set up a demo and I can show you how some of those values are rolled up and quantified for reporting.
For the people checking in with you later, there are two other questions. One with an anonymous attendee who asks, what's the pricing model? Is it a volume-based thing on how much data you're processing? And I guess a subscription on top of that, like a combination of the two?
Yeah.
Or
If you find me within 5 minutes after this webinar, it'll be free. Just kidding.
Yeah.
But I would say in terms of our general pricing model, it's split onto two pillars. One pillar is going to be an annual subscription model for access to the platform. And then the other component pillar is going to be on the amount of data that we process. So at the end of the day, we have to run our models. We have to analyze and process the data. We do have tiers for volume discounts because we understand working at an enterprise scale was going to be orders of magnitude higher than, let's say, a startup. We want to accommodate everyone, so there's flexibility there. But again, half is annual subscription for platform. The other half is going to be based off of volume.
Yeah, and what's really cool when you talk about volume, because I'm on the website now, and this is trusted by people at Dropbox, Disney, Essex, Netflix, Vodafone. So massive companies with lots of volume are trusting Dashbot. Another question here as well. Where does the analysis take place? Do you need to I guess the question is, do you run on-prem? Can you run
On-prem.
on?
Yeah. So Ken, I would have to argue that we are in a society and at a place of time now where hopefully everybody is on the cloud or some form of the cloud. So I would, with that understanding, the way we do collect your data is going to be through an API integration. And so very simply is like, we have a few lines of code that you need to input. And every time your bot, let's say, sends or receives a message, we get a copy of that is stored on our AWS servers. So on our cloud database, we run all the analysis and the processing on our side. And I know the follow-up question is going to be, what about security? What about data storage, hosting? We have all of that covered at a high level. Like, we have all the compliances like SOC 2, GDPR, ISO compliance. But really, we try to have all our customers input API redaction layer when they set up the integration. That way, when data gets sent to Dashbot, we never capture any of that personal information.
Yeah. Ken has also, oh, wait, just to us. I was like, you put it in the chat, but I don't know if you can see it, but you've got his email there, so you can shoot him a message afterwards and continue that
Awesome. Yeah,
conversation.
I'll copy that down.
So that is really cool. Uh, let's see if there's anything that we have missed here. Those two in the QA. Is there anything else in the regular chat? No, I think we did all the questions. We got 10 minutes left. Anyone, any final questions, or should we just all say thank you, Henry, for a wonderful learning experience here at CDI and Dashbot in a wonderful collaboration? Oh, wait, I see. No, next one. Boom. How does Dashbot compare with a tool like Heap? I am guessing you track different types of events with Heap tracking clicks in particular.
Yeah, you gave me a clue. I actually was not familiar with Heap, but you gave me a clue here. And you mentioned tracking different types of events, right? So Dashbot differentiates from any other like web event tracking or analytics platform in the sense that we specialize in conversational data. So while we can take in things like web events and clicks, that's really not our focus and our forte. We focus on the actual conversations. So what are people saying? How is the chatbot responding? Or in other cases, how is your live agent responding? How is your customer service rep responding? We look at the unstructured language and then we report on the language. What are the reasons? What are the topics, the sentiment? What is the journey that someone goes through within a conversation? And so a tool like Heap, unfortunately, wouldn't be able to track that journey within a conversation because it is focused on tracking events. So events like clicking on a landing page, right? Entering your login credentials for a portal. Those are more event-based tracking, again, whereas on our side, we are on the textual analysis, the conversation data-based tracking.
Yeah. And then there is a final question, which I kind of like. Are there situations where you shouldn't use a chatbot? I think that is like genuinely a question that more people should be asking, because a lot of times, like, we just think like, oh, a chatbot's the holy grail, but there are lots of problems that a chatbot's not going to solve for you. And a lot of times, when you have this much customer service inbound traffic, maybe you should fix your products. Like if everybody's complaining about your have a look at the products and maybe not focus on building a chatbot. So I think we did a session last week with Luke Kempen, who's our lead consultant in our office in Austin, Texas, around the business case for chatbots. And it's online, it's on YouTube, you can watch it. But there are really, a lot of questions that you need to ask and analysis you need to do to really understand if a chatbot makes sense. And there are ways to think about that. How many questions do we have coming in? What's the average cost of a question? How much investment am I doing in this chatbot now, but also the maintenance? What's the total cost of ownership? How does that influence the call center and the cost there? And there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that I think we shouldn't think about too lightly. So there's lots of situations where we shouldn't use chatbots from an enterprise perspective. Um, or maybe not do everything with a chatbot. Maybe it makes sense to just do 3 use cases and do them very well, and that's it. And don't, try to do everything with a chatbot. It depends per organization, per vertical, per everything, what makes sense.
Absolutely. And Hans, there's a good question for you. Are there any good resources for best practices in common verbiage in a chat?
Really? Where do you see that? I didn't even see. Oh, it's
It's the
down there.
next
Oh yeah,
question.
yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
appropriate.
I would, if I were you, I would go to conversationdesigninstitute.com or cdi.cx for short. There are lots of courses, certification programs around building good chatbots. And what we do at CDI, we focus on skill sets. It's mainly like the design of, how should a chatbot talk to customers, but also how does the chatbot understand what customers say, right? And that's kind of the ongoing tweaking of the chatbot, improving cognition, improving the designs of how the chatbot speaks, and that's where you get a lot of bang for your buck. So yeah, I would check out CDI. There's a lot of free courses there too. And of course, if you cannot be bothered by learning it yourself, we have a great team of consultants that can work with you every day to make your chatbots better. Did that
There.
sound silly? Was that pitch? Oh, it might have been a little pitchy. No, but no, check out CDI. And there's also for enterprise, what we're doing now is kind of fun. We do these expert reviews. So if you got a chatbot at an enterprise, our people actually free have a look at it, and we create a report for you to give you some feedback on it. And you can take that and just improve it yourself, or explore working with us in more depth. And then a lot of times when you got a lot of data, we work with Dashbot. We bring them in, and then together we can help you. Um, so yeah, check it out. And like I said earlier, if you want to learn about all this stuff, we also have a conference coming up in April in Barcelona. It's called Beyond Boundaries. Really excited for that one. We're gonna do. Are you familiar with Wim Hof? Have you heard of Wim Hof, Henry?
Yeah, he's the guy that, what is it, the ice bath king,
The
or
Ice
like,
Bath King. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So we've got his best friend Bart Brunk. It's his apprentice, his right hand man, who's going to be at that conference. Because we're going to be doing deep breathing sessions. Because for us, if AI is a reflection of the people that create it, we want people that have a very clear state of mind, that have compassion, that are calm. We want those people creating chatbots rather than anxious, frustrated people, because that will show in the work that they do.
Wow, that was deep, Hans. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we do. Okay, we need a dad joke from me. So, what kind of shoes do kidnappers wear? White fans. No, I like it. Uh,
I'm on the fence with dad jokes. I can't tell if I want to cringe into a shell of myself.
You
I'm
just
sorry.
got to embrace it. One day you'll have kids, Henry, and you'll go for it. See, I am now allowed to have these jokes, to tell these jokes. But yeah, let's see. I think we covered all the questions. I think we are at time. Let's see how many people we still have. We got 71 people, so we lost about 28. I think that's good. I think we lost them all at the dad joke. I think up
Yeah.
until we were good
Might
to
have been.
go. All right. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Dashbot. It's dashbot.io if you want to check out their website. They got a really cool button. It says book a demo. It's the quickest way to check in with Henry. To learn about conversation design, go to cdi.cx. Let's see, Ken, services overview. Ken, yes, we'll check in with you as well. I'll find you on LinkedIn or just shoot me a message, Ken, and we'll connect. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for spending some time with us wherever you are in the world, whether this is the beginning of your day or the end of it. Thank you so much. And we'll see each other again soon. You've
Thank
been
you.
wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
It's been a pleasure, everyone. Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right. Cheers.
Take care.